Hello, welcome back to Old Saul, where I, JD Adler, recite Grimm's fairy tales, specifically the tales put together in this collection here by this complete fairy tales of the Brothers Grimm, as put together by Jack Zipes. He translated it, he collected it, claims this is the most complete collection of Grimm's fairy tales you'll find anywhere. He even includes some that were not previously published. Some of that for good reason. He also claims this is the truest collection of their, truest translation from the old German into the modern English. I'll leave it up to the audience to decide whether or not his claims are accurate. But this is the collection I'm using, 242 stories, Grimm's fairy tales, Brothers Grimm. Today we're going to do two stories because the first one, Raff, is very short, just a page long. There's plenty of time for two. We'll get them both done. We're going to jump right in. Story number 10, Raff. Today I have to using my girl's backup glasses because I forgot mine and I won't be able to retrieve them later. So just bear with me. Luckily, not too many people are going to see this, honestly. Raff by the Brothers Grimm. The rooster said to the hen, "Now's the time the nuts are ripe. Let's go up to the hill and for once eat our fill before the squirrel hauls them all away." "Well, all right," responded the hen. "Let's go. Have a good time." They went up the hill, and since it was such a bright, cheery day, they stayed till evening. Now, I don't know whether it was because they had stuffed themselves too much, or whether they had become too high and mighty, but they did not want to return home on foot. So the rooster had to build a small carriage out of nutshells. When it was finished, the hen got in and said to the rooster, "Now you can just harness yourself to it." "You have some nerve," said the rooster. "I'd rather go home by foot than let myself be harnessed to this carriage. No, that wasn't part of our bargain. I'll gladly be coachman and sit on the box, but I refuse to pull the carriage." As they were quarreling, a duck came by quacking. "You thieves! Who said you could come up my nut hill?" I'm sorry. "You thieves, who said you could come up my nut hill? Just you wait. You'll pay for this." She charged at the rooster with wide open beak, but the rooster was on his toes and threw himself at the duck nice and hard. Then he dug his spurs in her so violently that the duck begged for mercy and willingly let herself be harnessed to the carriage as punishment. Now the rooster sat down on the box as coachman, and when they set out, he shouted, "Giddy up, duck! Run as fast as you can!" After they had gone some distance, they encountered two travelers on foot, a needle and a pin. "Stop! Stop!" the two cried out. It would soon be very dark, they said, and they would not be able to go one step further. Besides, the road was dirty, so they asked if they could have a ride. They had been at the tailor's tavern outside the town gate and had had one beer too many, which made them late as well. Since they were thin and did not take up much room, the rooster let them both get in, but they had to promise not to step on his or the hen's feet. Later that evening they came to an inn, and as they did not want to travel any farther, and as the duck was not walking well but swayed from side to side, they decided to stop there. At first the innkeeper raised a lot of objections and said his inn was already full. Moreover, he thought they were not a very distinguished-looking group. However, they used some sweet talk and offered him the egg that the hen had laid along the way and told him that he could also keep the duck who laid an egg a day. So they're now trafficking their... So finally he relented and said they could spend the night. Now they ordered some good hot food and had a merry time of it. Early the next morning, as the sun was rising and everyone was asleep, the rooster woke the hen, fetched the egg, pecked it open, and together they devoured it. After throwing the shells on the hearth, they went to the needle, who was still asleep, grabbed him by the head, and stuck him into the innkeeper's easy chair. Then they stuck the pin into his towel. Finally, without much ado, they flew away over the heath. The duck, who liked to sleep in the open air and had spent the night in the yard, heard the flapping of their wings. So she roused herself, found a brook, and swam off. That went much faster than being harnessed to a carriage. A few hours later, the innkeeper got out of bed, washed himself, and took the towel to dry himself. However, the pin scratched his face, leaving a red mark from ear to ear. Then he went in the kitchen and went to light his pipe. But as I leaned over the hearth, the eggshells popped into his eyes. Wow, everything's after my head this morning, he said, and went to sit down in his easy chair to settle into his bad mood. But he jumped up immediately and screamed, "Ow!" The needle stuck him worse than the pin and not in the head. Now he was completely angry and suspected the guests who had arrived so late the night before. But when he went looking for them, they were gone. Then he swore he'd never again let that riffraff stay at his inn, especially when they eat so much, pay nothing, and play mean tricks on top of it all. Riffraff. They're the worst. The riffraff. Poor people. They suck. Those riffraff. So I guess the moral of that story was pretty straightforward, that poor people are the worst. I guess. All right, what's next? Brother and sister, story 11. A little brother took his little sister by the hand and said, "Since our mother died, we've not had one moment of happiness. Our stepmother beats us every day, and when we come near her, she kicks us away with her foot. We get nothing but hard crusts of bread, just leftovers for food, and the dog under the table is better off. At least he gets a good chunk of meat to eat every now and then. Lord, have mercy on us. If our mother only knew. Come, let's go off together into the wide world." Seriously, that's awful. They walked over meadows, fields, and stones the entire day. When it began to rain, the sister said, God and our hearts are weeping at the same time. In the evening, they came to a great forest and were so exhausted from their grief, hunger, and long journey, they crept into a hollow tree and fell asleep. When they woke up the next morning, the sun was already high in the sky and warmed the tree with its rays. "Sister," said the brother, "I'm thirsty. If only I knew where to find a spring, I'd go and have a drink right away. Listen, I think I hear one gurgling." The brother stood up, took his sister by the hand, and set out to look for that spring. However, the evil stepmother, who was a witch, had noticed that the children had run away. Oh, that's nice of her. She had gone slinking after them in secret, as witches often slink, and had put a curse on all the springs in the forest. So when they found a spring rushing and leaping over stones, the brother wanted to take a drink, but the sister heard the gurgling spring say, "Whoever drinks of me will be turned into a tiger." That's fair warning, I guess. Then the sister exclaimed, "Please, brother, don't drink, or else he'll turn into a wild beast and tear me to pieces." And even though he was very thirsty, the brother did not drink. Instead, he said, "I'll wait until we reach the next spring." When they reached the next spring, once again the sister heard what it was babbling. "Whoever drinks of me will be turned into a wolf. Whoever drinks of me will be turned into a wolf." "Brother, brother," the sister exclaimed, "please don't drink or else you'll be turned into a wolf and eat me up." The brother did not drink and said, "I'll wait until we reach the next spring, but then I must drink no matter what you say. My thirst is much too great." When they came to the third spring, the sister heard the babbling of the spring. Whoever drinks of me will be turned into a deer. Whoever drinks of me will be turned into a deer. Oh, brother, please don't drink or else you'll be turned into a deer and run away from me. But the brother, who was already kneeling at the spring, leaned over and drank some of the water. Immediately, after a few drops had touched his lips, he lay there in the form of a fawn. The sister began weeping over her poor bewitched brother, sitting sadly at her side, and the little fawn wept too. Finally, the girl said, "Hush, my dear little fawn. I shall never forsake you." She took off her golden garter and put it around the fawn's neck. Then she pulled up some rushes and wove them into a soft rope, which she attached to the little animal. Afterwards, she led him onward and deeper into the forest. When they had gone a long, long way, they came to a little house, and the girl looked inside. Since it was empty, she thought, she might as well stay and live right here. So she looked for leaves and moss and made a soft bed for the fawn. Every morning she went out and gathered roots, berries, and nuts for herself, and for the fawn she brought back tender grass, which he ate out of her hand. This made him content, and he would romp around her in a playful fashion. At night, when the sister was tired and had said her prayers, she would lay her head on the back of the fawn. That was her pillow, and she would fall into a sweet sleep. If only her brother could have regained his human form, it would have been a wonderful life. For a long time she lived like this, all alone in the wilderness. However, it came to pass that the king of the country held a great hunt in the forest. I've noticed this as a trend in these stories. The king's always going for hunts and happening upon maidens in the forest. And soon horns could be heard along with the barking of dogs and the merry cries of the huntsmen. The fawn listened to the sounds and longed very much to be a part of it all. "Ah," he said to his sister, "let me go and join the hunt. I can't bear it any longer." He kept pleading until she gave her consent. Oh, so she can talk to the fawn. I didn't know that part. "But make sure you're back here by evening," she said to him. "I'm going to lock the door to keep the brutal hunters out." So she's letting a deer go on a hunt? Who does she think they're hunting? Anyway, "And when you return, I want you to knock on the door and say, 'My little sister, let me in.' That way I'll recognize you. If you don't say this, I won't open the door." Okay? Then the fawn ran off, glad and merry to be out in the open air. The king and his huntsmen saw the beautiful creature and set out in pursuit, but they could not catch up with him. Whenever they thought they had him for sure, he would burst through the bushes and disappear. When it got dark, he ran back to the little house, knocked, and said, "My little sister, let me in." So I guess the premise here is that according to them, the deer enjoy their part in the hunt, is the idea? Okay. The little door was open for him, and he jumped inside. Then he rested the entire night on his bed. The next morning, the hunt began anew, and when the fawn heard the horn again and the tally-ho of the huntsman, he became very restless and said, "Sister, open the door. I must be off." The sister opened the door for him, and he said, "Remember, you must be back by evening and say the passwords." When the king and his huntsmen, I think we all see where this is going. When the king and his huntsmen saw the fawn with the golden collar once more, they all pursued him. But he's still too swift and nimble for them. All day long, they chased him, but finally by evening they had surrounded him. Then one huntsman wounded him slightly on his foot. As the fawn slowly ran away, he was limping. This allowed the huntsman to trail him all the way to his house. And he heard the fawn cry out, "My little sister, let me in." He watched the door open and close quickly and took note of all that happened. Then the huntsman went back to the king and told him about everything he had seen and heard. "Tomorrow we shall hunt again," said the king. Meanwhile, the sister was greatly distressed when she saw her little fawn was wounded. She washed off the blood, placed herbs on the wound, and said, "Now go to bed, my dear fawn. You must let your wound heal." Actually, the wound was so slight the fawn did not even feel it the next morning. And once again, when he heard the merry cries of the hunt outside, he said, "I can't bear it. I've got to be there. I won't make it easy for them to catch me." The sister wept and said, "Now they'll kill you, and I'll be left all alone in the forest, forsaken by the whole world. I'm not going to let you out." "Then I'll die of misery," the fawn said. Responded the fawn. "Whenever I hear the sounds of the hunting horn, I feel as if I were going to burst out of my skin." After he said that, the sister could no longer refuse, and with a heavy heart she opened the door for him. The fawn bounded cheerfully and sprightfully into the forest. When the king caught sight of him, he said to his huntsman, "Now I want you to chase him the whole day and long and into the night, but make sure that you don't harm him." Later, as the sun began to set, the king turned to the huntsman and said, "All right, take me and show me the little house in the forest." After the king arrived at the front door, he knocked and called out, "Dear little sister, let me in." The door opened, and upon entering, the king stood face to face with the most beautiful maiden he had ever seen in his life. The maiden was frightened when she saw it was a man with a golden crown on his head and not her fawn. Yet he looked at her in a kind way, and after extending his hand, he said, "Would you like to come to my castle and be my dear wife?" Of course he did. They always fall in love and ask for brides immediately in these stories. There's never... Oh yes, he hasn't had a conversation. He doesn't know her name. He just found a woman in a cabin and was like, "That's the one." "Oh yes," responded the maiden. "She's on it." "But the fawn must come with me too. I won't ever forsake him." "He can stay with you as long as you live," said the king, "and he shall want for nothing." Just then the little fawn came running in, and his sister attached the rope of rushes to him, took the rope in her own hand, and led him out of the house. The king lifted the beautiful maiden onto his horse and brought her to his castle, where the wedding was celebrated with great splendor. Now the sister was queen, and for a long time they all lived together in happiness. The fawn was well tended and ran about the castle garden. In the meantime, the evil stepmother, remember the evil stepmother? That's where this all began. In the meantime, the evil stepmother, who had caused the children to run away in the first place, thought that the sister had been torn to pieces by wild beasts, and that the brother, as a fawn, had been shot to death by huntsmen. When she learned instead how happy they were and how well everything was going for them, jealousy and resentment stirred in her heart and gave her no peace. Her one and only thought now was to find a way to bring about their misfortune again. Her own daughter, who was as ugly as sin and had only one eye, reproached her by saying, "I'm the one who should be queen. Why don't I have any luck?" "Just be quiet," said the old woman, who gave her reason to be satisfied. "When the right time comes, I'll know what to do." Finally, the right time came. The queen gave birth one day to a baby boy while the king was out hunting. So the old witch assumed the form of the chambermaid, went into the room where the queen was lying, and said to the convalescent, "Come, your bath is ready. It will make you feel better and give you fresh strength. Quick, before it gets cold." The witch's daughter had come too. Together they carried the frail queen into the bathroom, put her in the tub, locked the door, and ran away, for they had made such a terrible fire in the bathroom that the queen was soon suffocated to death. When that was done, the old woman took her daughter, put her nightcap on her, and laid her in bed in place of the queen. She also gave her the shape and features of the queen. However, she could not replace the eye the daughter had lost. Therefore, the daughter had to lie on the side of where she had no eye. That way the king would not notice anything amiss. In the evening, when he returned home and heard his wife had given birth to a baby boy, he was very happy and wanted to go to his dear wife's bedside and see how she was doing. But the old woman cried out quickly, "For goodness sake, keep the curtain closed. The queen must not be exposed to light. She needs peace and quiet." The king stepped back and was thus prevented from discovering the false queen lying in the bed. However, at midnight, when everyone was asleep except the nurse, who was sitting by the cradle in the nursery and watching over the baby all by herself, the door opened, and the true queen entered. She lifted the baby out of the cradle, took him in her arms, and suckled him. Then she puffed up his little pillow, put him back in the cradle, and covered him with a little blanket. Nor did she forget the fawn. She went to the corner where he was lying and stroked his back. Then she silently left the room, and when morning came, the nurse asked the guards whether they had seen anyone entering the castle during the night. "No, we didn't see a soul," they replied. Thereafter, the queen came many nights and never uttered a word. The nurse always saw her, but she did not dare tell anyone about it. After some time had passed, the queen began to speak, and one night she said, "How's my child? How's my fawn? Twice more I'll come, and then I'll be gone." The nurse did not answer her. But when the queen disappeared, she went to the king and told him everything. "Oh God," he exclaimed, "what's going on? Tonight I'll keep watch over the child myself." In the evening, he went into the nursery, and at midnight the queen reappeared, and she said, "How's my child? How's my fawn? Once more I'll come, then I'll be gone." She nursed the child as she usually did, and then disappeared. The king did not dare to speak to her, but he kept watch the following nights as well. Once again, she said, "How's my child? How's my fawn? There's no more time. Soon I'll be gone." The king could no longer restrain himself. He sprang forward and said, "You can be no one else but my dear wife." At that very moment, life was restored to her by the grace of God. Indeed, she was alive and well, and the rosy color came back to her cheeks. She then told the king how the evil witch and her daughter had committed cruel crimes against her. So the king had them led before the court, and they received their sentences. The daughter was taken into the forest, where wild beasts tore her to pieces, while the witch was thrown into a fire and miserably burned to death. When there was nothing left of her but ashes, the fawn was transformed and regained his human form. From then on, sister and brother lived happily until the end of their days. And that's the Brothers Grimm story. Yeah, that's the Brothers Grimm right there. Brother and sister. Brother and sister, that's the title of that story. About, what is that about? And then so at the end of that there, they said that they killed her, but then she keeps coming. So she was a ghost who was revived by, or a zombie? What was she? But she was still nourishing with milk, and then taking care. And then when the king recognizes her, then she comes back to life. What was that magic? What was the nature of that magic? I don't understand. There you go. Once again, I'm not really entirely sure what these tales are about. Just the randomness of life. Life is so... The suffering and the miracles of miraculous savings are all so random, I guess, is the recurring theme of these stories. That life is random and brutal. And... yeah. Brothers Grimm, next time we're doing Rapunzel. So, be prepared to see what the original version of Rapunzel sounds like. Brothers Grimm, strap in for that. I'm JD Adler, and this has been Old Saw. Thank you for attending, those of you who did.